Independent group, 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for obliging me. And I'm sharing with my colleague if he's here. I welcome the bill. It's 45 sections and 5 parts, and it's going to set up the agency. However, it's important to put it in perspective, and I think the must-start perspective to put it in and why we're debating here today. And I know that I take exception when people complain there's nobody in the Dáil, because I know TDs are very busy and they're on committees, and I never join in that. But it is significant that we're talking about gender and sexual-based violence and domestic violence, and we don't have huge interest. And I say that most reluctantly because I'll be running myself as soon as I finish speaking. But it is a really important topic with serious consequences for physical and mental health of the women and the men affected, not to mention our economy. And so the context is Women's Aid Femicide Watch, 1996 to 23, 261 women have died violently up to the 23rd of July this year. 12 women alone, and there are only 12 months in a year, died violently last year in 2022, the highest number since 2007. 6 women died so far this year up to the 23rd of July. 20 children have died during incidents where women have died violently. 168 women have been killed in their own homes, 63%. 87% of women where the case has been resolved were killed by a man known to them. 13% of women only were killed by a stranger. 1 in every 3 femicide victims is killed, 1 in every 3 by a current or former male intimate partner. 55% of resolved cases. Women under the age of 35 make up 50% of the cases in Ireland. In almost all murder-suicide cases, 22 out of 23, in almost all, the killer was the woman's partner. That's the background now that we're talking about today as we talk about introducing an agency under the legislation. Assessing the social and economic costs, and I do this reluctantly, but I do it for the economists that are predominantly male, and when they tell us about a thriving economy, and they leave out quite a lot of important variables and factors. Assessing the social and economic costs of domestic violence, July 21, report jointly published by NUIG, my own university in Galway, and Safe Ireland. The report estimates that the annual cost of domestic violence to be at least 2.7 billion. 2.7 billion to the Irish economy, and this does not include the cost of service provision or housing. And that's an underestimate, in my opinion. So this bill today seeks to build on initiatives up to now and on the suffering and deaths of women and some men. That's what we're doing here today. And I would like to be very positive and welcome it, but my experience in the Dáil today has made me extremely sceptical as a woman, as a TD, as a mother. And outside of housing and health, this topic I have raised, as other TDs have, most frequently since 2016, with the view to doing something and stopping the talking. I worry that the agency will be a further layer of bureaucracy. I'm supporting the legislation. I have serious concerns that it will be another level of bureaucracy. I want to thank the Digest, as usual, for their very good paper, and they tell us that the cost will be 3.4 million per year. That's the expected cost of the new agency. In the meantime, I have a volume here from a domestic violence organisation on the ground in my Cullen, used to be in Oughterard, struggling to continue. I know the Department of Justice met them earlier this year, but nothing has been resolved in relation to the wonderful service that they provide. But we're going to set up a new agency that will cost 3.4 million per year. With the CEO, which this week we talked about Children's Health Ireland and his CEO and a board totally unaccountable. no mechanism for accountability, no mechanism for publishing minutes or knowing what's happening in Children's Health Ireland. And here we're setting up a new board. Now, I'm going to go along with it. It was one of the recommendations and a commitment in the third national strategy. But I'm putting on the record that I am extremely worried that it will be unaccountable and that the CEO is reporting back to the Minister, not to the board, as I understand it. Back to the Minister, totally under control of the Minister, and Ministers change. And just to put that again in perspective, you think I'm being too negative. The timeline, from my experience, domestic gender-based violence, look, task force was set up in 1996. Do you remember Etna Fitzgerald? She topped the poll in Labour. She wrote a very good introduction to it when the report was published in 1997. She set out the blueprint back in 97, the year my child was born, my second child, who's 26 now. And really, nothing has happened in terms of reducing the what's called the epidemic of violence. I'm going to come back to that word, epidemic. And then the Savvy report was published in 2002, and it showed the prevalence of violence against men and women, predominantly women. And then they followed that up with a qualitative report, and that was an excellent qualitative report a few years later, but the government didn't listen. And it noted that the women and men who came forward did so because of the care taken to do that research, and they disclosed for the very first time what had happened to them at an earlier stage in their lives. We've had various strategies, and this is the third strategy. We've had an audit by TUSLA in relation to the refuge services, which leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the quantity. And even the commitment now is way before what is demanded or obligated to us under the Istanbul Convention. We've had a citizens' assembly that was set up with no remit to deal with it. And thanks be to God, or to the goddess, let me say, that they put in a special chapter on domestic and gender-based violence. And they included it because they saw it was absolutely of utmost importance in relation to equality issues. We had the audit, as I've mentioned, of the structures, which showed that the structures, notwithstanding the 1996 task force, setting out exactly what needed to be done, that right up to 2021, 22 and 23, all of the structures are all divided from each other. None of them aligned with each other, and presumably that's what this agency is going to tackle. The CSO sexual violence survey, which was finally published 20 years after the original one by Savvy. And remember, for 20 years, the organisations on the ground have been begging, appealing, and just appealing to various governments to carry out